Now, with the reopening of Australia's borders to international travel, this has meant students from foreign countries are able to call Australia home once again while studying. However, English for many of these students may not be their first or even second language. So just how important is it to have a grasp when attending a tertiary education? Emeritus Professor Greg Whateley from Group Colleges Australia is here to join us. Take us through what's happening.
Hey Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm doing very well. It's good to speak to you. This is an important one. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen in relation to the evident return of international students post-COVID-19 and lockdown and all of that nonsense that we saw last year?
Yeah, it certainly was a lot of nonsense, Mike, that's for sure. I'm interested in the, post-COVID. One wonders whether we're actually in post-COVID or we're sort of still part of it. But anyway, let's work on the premise that we're coming out of it. That's the important issue. International students are returning to Australia, and that's important to see because they provide a huge resource for us in terms of income and, of course, even supporting various professions such as restaurants and cafes and the like. Now, the important issue, though, is I think we're about to see the growth return. A lot of people around me are saying that there's a tsunami coming. In fact, numbers will be larger than they ever were before, pre-pandemic. Which is interesting in itself. Another intriguing issue is that during this period, 2021 in particular, a lot of students were online, either in country online or overseas online. And the satisfaction rates of being online are actually quite high. Deloitte pointed out about 6 months ago that it was 7% of students were happy to stay online. And my own institution, had 92% of students happy to stay online. So I think what we will see is a return of international students combined with what I'm calling a hybrid model, where students choose to either stay online or come face-to-face in the classroom environment.
Absolutely, and that's something we've seen in the workplace as well when it comes to that hybrid model. So it's interesting to think about it within the context of education. What do institutions look for when it comes to being a genuine contender in relation to their understanding of the English language and what you've seen?
Yeah, that's right. It's very important that we only enrol genuine students. That is, students who wish to take out an award and that study is their priority, of course. And the second most important thing is that they have the satisfactory or necessary English proficiency to be successful in the award. Now, that's a little bit on the vague side because it often depends on what it is they're studying. For example, if a student came in and wanted to be a concert pianist, the reliance on English is significantly less than if they wanted to come in and be a lawyer. So institutions have the authority under the regulations to specify their own standard of English proficiency. Often things like an IELTS test is used as a way of gaining an idea of the level of proficiency. But at the end of the day, and this is a little bit on the vague side, but at the end of the day, it's important that an institution is confident that their potential student is able to graduate successfully and has the necessary English proficiency to do so.
Absolutely. So why must institutions, I suppose, have a policy in place within English proficiency? I understand, as you've mentioned, there are a few tests and things they can do, but why do you think a policy is important when it comes to acceptance?
Well, the national code actually makes certain that you do have a policy in place. So it's actually mandatory for an organisation. But when developing that policy, it's actually really quite important that it's well thought through and is designed at the level necessary for your students to success in their program.
Yeah, so why must students demonstrate proficiency and ability to be successful in your eyes? And I guess what have you seen in the past over these last few years in relation to that?
Well, the truth, at the end of the day, we want our students to graduate successfully. But the other thing is if they, and that will depend on the profession to which they into, but also if they're applying for longer term stays in Australia, permanent residency, for example, they'll need to, English proficient. And if they essentially want to survive in an English environment, an English-speaking environment, that will be a really important part of the process.
Absolutely. Well, let's just touch on some of the consequences for the lack of proficiency and maybe jumping into something that students aren't prepared for. What have you seen there?
Well, the danger is that they're not prepared for a particular profession to which they might go into. There were tales told of nursing students who weren't English proficient and caused some kind of chaos in hospital environments. There are examples of students who move into professions such as law who don't have the necessary competency to write up documents and the like. So it's really important that a student, an international student who studies in an English-speaking country and does the assessment and course in English, has the sufficient level at the start of the program so that they can progress appropriately and fulfill all the obligations that go with speaking English.
Certainly some important things to consider for institutions as we get back to a COVID normal. Emeritus Professor Greg Whateley, thank you so much for joining me on the program today and sharing some insight.
Pleasure, Mike. All the best.